Enfold Proactive Health Trust, Creating Safe Spaces, presents Demystifying Sexuality, a video series. What are some common issues in reproductive health? How can one manage them? Part 2, presented by Ms. Neeraja Sajan, Intersex Studies Scholar, Member, Intersex Human Rights India, IHRI, Dr. Shoiba Saldana, Co-founder, Enfold Proactive Health Trust, obstetrician and gynecologist.
Hi, I am Neeraja Sajan, a social scientist and intersex studies scholar. Today, I will be talking about reproductive health and transgender and intersex persons. A transgender person is someone whose gender identity is not the gender assigned to them at the time of birth. While the term transgender is an umbrella term that covers a lot of different and diverse gender identities, here I will be speaking about trans men and trans women. Many transgender people find it difficult to consult or go to a doctor, especially when it comes to reproductive health. It is very important to choose a doctor who is sensitized to the needs of the trans person and understands the needs of the trans person coming to them. Choosing a doctor that is recommended by other trans persons or by organizations working towards the rights of transgender people would be helpful in this matter. For trans people about to go through gender affirming surgeries, it would be helpful if they choose a gynecologist or a urologist with whom they plan to consult in the future after the surgery, before the surgery itself. That way, you can request the doctor to consult with the doctor who is going to carry out the gender affirming surgery so that the gynecologist or urologist can understand the medical needs and help the trans person in the future. Also, trans people who are undergoing hormone therapy would find it helpful if their doctor consults with gynecologist and urologist for the same reasons. Now, many trans people prefer to store their ova or eggs or sperm in facilities such as a sperm bank before they go through gender affirming surgery. This is to ensure that they can have biological children in the future if they choose to. There have been great strides in medical and technological advancements when it comes to reproductive health and transgender people. Around the world, trans people have been breaking the norms that are related to childbearing. Many trans men, the fathers, have given birth to their children, to their biological children. A trans woman, with the help of doctors and medication, has been able to breastfeed her biological child who was born through surrogacy. Each of these situations are individually oriented and cannot be generalized. Therefore, it is very important to find what one's identity and needs and what one is comfortable with. When it comes to intersex people are persons born with sex characteristics atypical of male and female sex. When it comes to intersex people and reproductive health, the first step to be undertaken is to ensure that no unnecessary medical surgeries or intervention is carried out on intersex children or adults. Intersex genital mutilation of intersex children and unnecessary medical procedure on intersex adults can cause extremely adverse effects on their reproductive health. Some unnecessary procedures might take away fertility from some intersex people, while others might make sexual intercourse painful or, in some cases, penetrative intercourse impossible. Some intersex people with some intersex variations might be able to impregnate or carry a pregnancy to full term naturally without any help of technology or medicine. For others, it might become possible with technology's help. Today, we need to know what technology and what medical intervention can help us in these situations. In certain other intersex variations, such as variations that causes undescended testicles, there is a fear of malignancy or cancer. It is very important to understand every option available to the person in such situations before making a decision. The information should not only be about the option itself, but also about the results and side effects in each option. Now, due to technology and various intersex organizations around the world, it is possible for an intersex person to connect to another intersex person who's going through or has gone through a similar situation. It will be very helpful if the person is able to have a discussion about this with another person or a group of people.
One of the problems which I've been finding that couples come to me with is not being able to have sex. Now, the causes for that are very many, but I often tell people that it's somewhat like, if you grew up in a household which was, say, vegan, and you've never eaten any non vegetarian food, you've never had, eggs or meat or anything of that sort. And then one day you get married and they give you an entire roast chicken and they say, you must eat it. It's fabulous. You can't. If all your life you've been told that this was something bad, this was something horrible, this was something wrong, you can't change your mindset just because you got a ring on your finger or you tied a Mangalsutra around your neck or because you're in a relationship where sex is expected. And so, this, especially among women, because in our gendered society, boys still have a space of talking about sex, of, they call them non veg jokes and stuff like that. They watch pornography. There's a lot more space boys get to explore their sexuality as compared to women. For girls to say that they're watching pornography or talking about sexual activities or just talking about sex in general, asking questions, has to be in a huddled group only among friends who may know as little as they themselves. And so they grew up with this idea that sex is something wrong. And for those who are very, very temperamentally quiet, sensitive, and not able to break out of this, it ends up creating a problem when they get into a relationship where the fear of sex is so far and so much that they're not able to have sex. So let's look at sexual dysfunction. In men and women, and in any person, sexual dysfunction has four areas. One is that you need to have an urge or a desire to have sex. The next thing is that you have an attraction towards somebody because sex is something that you have with a partner. The third part is the actual physical activity of sex. And the fourth part is having sexual satisfaction or the orgasm. So let's look at each part separately. If you look at the desire or sexual urge, it changes with your mind, with your emotions, with your thoughts and your feelings. When you've seen a movie which has a lot of sexual scenes, it may increase your sexual urge or it may decrease it. If a person has been sexually molested, their sense of their sexuality gets harmed and it often gives them a negative feeling towards sex. There are some people who don't have sexual feelings and we call them asexual. And it's perfectly normal. It's as normal to be asexual as it is to have a bisexual sexual orientation, to enjoy having sex with multiple partners, to have sex in different spaces, whether with the same gender partner or different gender partner. So, asexuality is not a disease. There is somewhere a discourse, sexual discourse, which presumes that everybody must want to have sex all the time. And that's not so. So, it's very important when we look at it to see the urges and desires, to see where it comes. Sometimes, in areas of stress, people have a heightened sexual desire, which is a very primitive, atavistic way of trying to ensure that you have something which releases your anxiety. At other times, a lot of stressful situations, loss, emotional, the death of someone close to you, emotional pain can reduce the sexual urge, but would be normally temporary. The next part is the sexual attraction. Very often people say, are you sexually attracted to the same gender person, to a different gender person? But truly speaking, are we sexually attracted to a gender, or are we attracted to a person's voice, their smell, the way they carry their body, their personality, their temperament, how they interact with you? So does gender really matter so much, or is it an entire amalgam of how that human being is experienced by you? And so, therefore, the sexual attraction itself has so many varied spaces of that. The next part is a physical capability. In women, it can cause what is known as vaginismus. So there is this whole concept of the hymen. Now we know that the hymen is just a thin tissue which is between the external part of the genital organs, that is known as the fourchette, and the inside of the vagina. It is larger in young girls, and as they grow, it opens out. And we know that using tampons, having a very active physical life, can tear open the vagina, and not even just tear it, just stretch it open so that a girl may not have any discomfort having sex for the first time. However, some girls have what is known as vaginismus. Vaginismus is a problem where the vagina becomes very, very tight when she tries to have sex. And this is a emotional and a psychological reaction where the muscles tighten. If she's actually taken for an examination, though she may not allow her intra-vaginal examination by the doctor, her muscles and the body parts are absolutely same. But the moment somebody tries to insert something like an instrument by the doctor, or her partner tries to insert any object or a finger into the vagina, it causes a tightness. This normally comes from possibly psychological fears that the person had. It comes from being growing up in a very, very traditional family. It can happen that she had an unpleasant experience sometime. All these things can cause it. And psychological care, a gentle partner, can most of the time uh, conquer the vaginismus. In men, the problem is of erection. If they're not able to have an erection, they may not be able to have a sexual penetrative experience. This case, again, more than about 90%, it is psychological. He may be exhausted, he may be tired, he have gone through a severe stress, like he may have gone through surgery, he may have gone through a life-threatening disease, he may have had a road accident from which he recovered with a lot of fractures. Many, many reasons can be there by which a man sexual ability to have an erection reduces, and most of this reduces with time. It can cause a fear in a man if he tries to have an erection. He was sexually fine earlier, and suddenly he's not able to have an erection. It can cause a lot of fear, but mostly psychological counseling will settle this. For those men who are on high blood pressure tablets, who have diabetes, and who have other severe health issues like hypothyroidism or hyperthyroidism, which is not treated properly, they may also end up with some amount of sexual dysfunction or a lack of erection. In this case, they can take medicines which improve the erection, but they should be taken under a doctor's supervision because they need to be titrated. The dose has to be titrated. Plus, they do have side effects like effects on the heart and the brain. It can cause severe headaches, throbbing headaches. It could cause constriction of the heart muscles, which could cause angina. It could cause reduced blood supply to the kidneys. And so it's important to take this under medical supervision. And finally, the orgasm state, where a person may have an erection, but it comes down without an ejaculation or orgasm. And even a woman may not have an orgasm, even after sex. And this often happens because of a lack of foreplay rather than any medical issue. And it needs probably a proper counseling of both the couple to be able to understand what is exactly causing the problem where the orgasm doesn't happen. To look for help when there is a sexual dysfunction, even for people who are within the heteronormative paradigms, so a woman or a male who are both heterosexual, it is difficult to get a doctor who understands the different variations and the concerns and issues a person may face with regard to their sexuality. But for a person who is a homosexual person, like having a gay male or a lesbian, or who may be bisexual sexual orientations, for them getting somebody to understand their sexual issues is often practically impossible. And what does a person who's transgender do? The gynecologist may not be able to understand what to do. I don't understand your health issues. So it's very, very important that we have training for doctors, particularly in the area of sexual dysfunction for people who fall outside the heteronormative uh, lines. One of the greatest causes of death in India for women is cervical cancer. However, in urban women, breast cancer has now gone above cervical cancer in terms of causing death. Both of them are preventable as well as detectable at the early stage where they can be operated and 100% cured. Let's look at cervical cancer. Cervical cancer, the risks are more when a girl is married at a young age and she has babies at a younger age. And as we know in India, a lot of girls get married before 18 and may even have a child before that. This increases the risk for cervical cancer. So it's important that a girl has cervical pap smears and examination of the cervix regularly every 3 years from about 3 to 5 years after she becomes sexually active. So if she became sexually active at 14 or 15, by 18 she should have at least an examination of the cervix by a medical person or a pap smear. And this should continue through life. If she has an abnormal cervical smear, she can undergo treatment, which is early treatment of infections which can trigger cervical cancer. Another preventive is the human papilloma virus vaccine. It is known that the human papilloma virus is one of the triggers of cervical cancer. Almost 70% of cancers are found to have a human papilloma virus DNA inside it. And so, a human papilloma virus vaccine should be given to women before they start sexual activity. There are 3 doses given at 0 month, 1 to 2 months, and 6 months. So far, they have shown a promising increase in immunity, which may prevent the transmission of human papilloma virus. Earlier, it was given only to girls, but in Australia now it is being given to boys and girls because it is a sexually transmitted virus. Breast cancer is becoming a very common cancer for urban women. Now, what are the factors which contribute to it? One of them is taking a lot of hormonal medications. Another is taking a lot of fertility drugs. So, women who have taken treatment for fertility have a higher risk of getting breast cancers. Smoking, poor physical activity, and excessive fat in the body can increase the risk of breast cancer. Unfortunately, in India, we have a breast cancer which comes at an earlier age than those in the West. So it comes around 35, 40, 45 years of age. And it is also much more malignant and acts very rapidly. So, therefore, the traditional ways in the West of having mammograms after a particular age does not help so much as having a regular breast examination, self examination. So, it is advised that after the age of 20, every girl should examine her breasts after her periods. Why after the periods? Because before the periods, breasts are normally painful, tense, and they feel very lumpy. After the periods, the breasts are very soft and it's able to detect any sort of lump. What you're looking for is a peanut or a wad of cotton wool somewhere in the breast. You look into the armpits, you press the armpits, then you check the breasts in 2 concentric circles and you gently press the nipple to see if there's any discharge which is blackish or blood stained. If there is any of these things, you should go and see your doctor. You can also examine your breasts in a mirror and see whether there is any skin changes like a puckering or a pulling in or a small mark over there, which you need to show to your doctor. After the age of 40, it is good to get a mammogram done. And the ICMR guidelines is to do a mammogram every 2 years, particularly if you have breast cancer in your family. That means your mother, mother's sisters, father's sisters, your own sisters, or your grandmothers have had breast cancer. Then your risk increases somewhat and you need to do a general checkup. A lot of breast cancer surgeons are finding that those women who do a regular breast examination pick up a cancer at a stage 1 or 2 where it is completely operable and treatable with chemotherapy and radiation. And so it is highly advised that women learn how to do a self examination. You can see it online and do it regularly. Nowadays, we find that a lot of lifestyle diseases, whether it's diabetes, high blood pressure, thyroid dysfunction, are coming up at an earlier and earlier stage. Along with that, we often hear about cancer in our near and dear ones, among family and friends, and there seems to be an upsurge in the incidence of cancer. These things often cause fear and anxiety in people. One of the ways of having a healthy body and a healthy mind is to work out during the daytime, sleep at night, get a good sleep of at least 7.5 hours daily, have a lot of exposure to fresh air and sunlight during the daytime, physical activity, work that you enjoy doing. If you have emotional issues, stressors, meet a psychologist, meet a counselor, meet friends, de stress yourself, have a lifestyle which is healthy. This makes a huge difference. The next thing is if you have people in your family who have had either cancers, who have lifestyle diseases, it's important to get your own checkups done. Instead of worrying about, oh my gosh, my mother had ovarian cancer or my father had a brain tumor, it makes more sense to just be aware of it and do your regular checkups. In fact, I would say a lot of people who have cancers in their family are very smart and take care, and they may pick it up even earlier in a treatable stage rather than people who don't have any cancer or any health problems in their families and they become complacent and they say, oh, I don't need regular checkups. I'm family, my family is healthy, I have good genes. And then they become careless and they may end up finding out that they have a cancer or a disease at a much later stage. So I would advise being smart, being healthy works best. Thank you.
This video is part of a series of videos and learning content aimed at addressing gender-based violence. These videos provide practitioner perspectives by professionals and experts in the field. We hope these videos generate further discussions with peers, family members, and teachers, encourage curiosity, and seed further research ideas in these domains. We gratefully acknowledge the following for their support: Gaurav Krishna, Keshav Rajendran, Ishwar Shankar, Mohan Ram, Clockwork Captions, Enfold Consultants, Ford Foundation. The copyright and other intellectual property rights in respect of this video belong exclusively to Enfold Proactive Health Trust, Enfold. Enfold licenses this video under the terms of Creative Commons License CC BY-NC-ND 4.0, the details of which can be found at https://creativcommonslicense.org/licenses/by-NC-ND/4.0/. Any use or reproduction of this video contrary to or in violation of the terms of the aforesaid Creative Commons license will be illegal, and Enfold reserves the right to take suitable action in respect thereof. Enfold also reserves the right to modify, terminate, or revoke the license granted as aforesaid, or otherwise exercise any and all rights in respect of its intellectual property without further notice, and the same shall be binding on the licensee or user or reader thereof. June 2021. Enfold Proactive Health Trust. www.enfoldindia.org. Contact info@enfoldindia.org. +91 99 000 94251. www.enfoldindia.org.